Hello, 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 everyone. Happy Monday, happy Fed week. How are we doing today? Good morning, John. Good morning, Daniel. Good morning, Jacob. Good morning, Patrick. Good morning, Heinrich. Good morning, Sterling. So I'm putting in a couple earnings. Tyson was a beat miss, a number of revenue misses this morning. It was interesting that Tyson was a miss on the revenue. Uh, what else we have? We have again Cummins was a beat miss. Berkshire Hathaway was a miss, and Buffett is stepping down by the end of the year. So there you go. There you go. Buffett's very long run. Good morning, Royal Palms. Good morning, Mark. Where else do we sit? Where else? Thank you for putting in the news. Let's just get right to the markets. Hopefully, everyone had a good weekend. This morning, nothing out so far. Nothing out so far. We have S&P Global Composite and Services coming out 15 minutes after the cash open, 9:45 Eastern. And then, more important, the ISM Services. ISM Services, I'm going to be watching 10 a.m. For what the effects that has on the price action, because not only do we have the PMI still expected to barely be in expansion, 50.6, so I'm keeping an eye on that, but I'm also watching the employment number, which is in contraction already from prior, so let's see if it stays in contraction, and the prices number, which was still pretty hot last time, so services prices, whether that's cooling off or staying hot. What else we have? We have 3 and 6 months bill auctions. Now, rounding out this week, tomorrow we don't have much. Import Exports Red Book. Wednesday is the big day, Fed day, the Fed pause day, and what's going to be more important is the press conference. The press conference coming in after the interest rate decision. So that's the big thing this week. Thursday is a very light news week. Thursday we got, as always, initial and continuing jobless claims, and not much else. Friday, since quiet period is over with the Fed meeting, look at this. I mean, come on. Williams, Barr, Kugler, Goolsbee, Waller, Williams, Cook, even tonight, this has to be some kind of conference or something. Cook, Hammock, and Mussolini all speaking. So Friday, they've had to not speak for like a week and a half, and now they all got to speak. Yay for us. All right. All right. So far this morning, we got a pretty red day after what we had like 9 straight days, a run of 9 straight days. Netflix, Disney down. I'm watching for a short-term top in Netflix. We got a lot of DeMarc sell setups going on. It is very overextended, so I'm watching for a pullback in that. But across the board, we've now paused. We'll take a look at the charts and I'll give you my thoughts on that. Comm services, energy, and technology, the weakest. Only basic material on a nice bounce in gold. I'll show you what I was looking for in that too. Fed watch for Wednesday is 98% for a pause, and now 65% for a pause in June, and then 3 cuts now priced in. So 3 cuts now priced in. Fear and greed, we're finally up to the upper end of neutral. So we finally got out of extreme fear and fear. So going to be keeping an eye on that too. And Schiller PE, 35.26. Again, the market with this rally is the market's not cheap. Good morning, PMG. Job interviews for Powell's job. Well, Trump said he wasn't going to fire him. Wasn't going to fire him. Now, whether he puts in a proxy, his own like spokes who he's going to put in for nomination, and it starts trying to overrule and starts trying to say how dovish they're going to be with interest rates. But we'll see how again, if that happens, we'll see how the longer term end of the yield curve reacts. Hasn't happened yet, but we'll see if that does happen. Now, in terms of earnings this week, you got a lot of companies, but not a lot that's going to move the markets. Sterling already put in some stuff from today. After the close, the big one is Palantir. Then we got Hims, Hers, and Ford. Tomorrow, not much. We got Ferrari and Constellation Brands. After the close, you got AMD, Rivian. Wednesday, you got Uber and Disney. After the close, you got fraud, Carvana, and that's about it. I got a lot of Dutch Brothers around me. I've never tried their coffee. Has anybody tried Dutch Brothers coffee? I'm just wondering. I want some feedback on Dutch Brothers. Peloton Thursday, Shopify Thursday, ConocoPhillips, Coinbase after close on Thursday, Cloudflare on Friday. Not much to talk about. So we have a lot going on this week, but not a lot that's going to really move the markets. Oh, SMCI. Not going to mention that too much about fraud there, but that's on Tuesday. So, good morning, Harold. All right. Now, we nearly completed the double on Friday. Also, let's get into this. Weekly. We closed right at the top of the rotation zone. Almost pretty much in neutral mode. Neutral mode on the weekly. And we closed above on the daily and the weekly, the 62.5. So, that technically flips the probabilities for higher price action. All right? Does that mean we can't have pullbacks? No. Look at this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 straight days. Would I be surprised to see it pull back? We got the 50 down here below, like at Friday's low and Thursday's low area with the rising rotation zone. Would I be surprised to see this turning into support? We're way overbought. We got cycles rolling over finally. So I'm watching for a pullback and then a bounce play. Even if we pulled back closer to about 55.20, would still be fine. Okay? So that's what I'm keeping an eye on now. A pullback and then a bounce play. At least, and we'll see what that bounce play brings us, because technically we could return to the high areas. This market is very complacent. On the shorter term, today I'm keeping an eye right around 56.40 area, 56.41 on any pullback. And if we did pull back before, bigger than that, if we had a bigger pullback between today and tomorrow, my key levels are about 56.07 to 55.91 is my major support area. The NASDAQ, same thing here. Closing. Barely, but closing above the 62.5. The 62.5 was 2188.50. We closed on Friday at 195.25. So, and closing above the weekly rotation zone, shifting it to neutral mode. The bigger pullback area right now, this will keep rising, but the bigger pullback is about 19,700, 19,700, 19,690 and 19,700. The minor pullback areas are 19.9, and then you got 19.780 to 19.8. By the way, I didn't go through the rally points. I'll have to jump back to the S&P. Really, the S&P is the final target on the. Let me just do that right now. The final target on any rally 57.38.75, and then my major target. First one is 57.80, and then 58.33 on the NASDAQ. My target, I think I posted that on Slice. I don't know if I mentioned it here. After we finished the double, was 23.35 area with the 200. And my next key target is 20,505 roughly, and then 20,934. So those are my upside targets. The Dow has not closed above the 62.5. The Dow very key support is 40,900. The Russell, also a long way off from the 62.5, but in the short term, the key support right now is coming in right about 1982. 1982. VIX, officially on Friday. The 87.5 rule had it at 22.37. We ticked off the low of 22.34. So we've technically completed the 87.5, which was what I was watching for. So now I will be watching for good potential volatility plays to establish, again, potential long volatility. But this is not something that has to be rushed into, especially since we tipped the probabilities higher. Yeah, we are going to have a little volatility bumping up with the Fed meeting, especially the press conference. But I'm going to be watching for setups in whatever volatility measure you want. I'd watch for if you get some potential long volatility setups over the next little bit. Again, I don't think this has to be rushed into just yet because we've tipped the probabilities higher for even after a pullback for short-term price action. Now, those again are any probabilities. Can anything happen? Yeah, but this is something that you could also leg into. You could also say, I'm going to put on a little volatility play, and I'm not giving trade recommendations, but it paid off last time when I said on this channel, hey, let's watch for setting up long volatility stuff, and we've been getting more and more volatility bumps. So again, you don't have to rush in, but it might be wise if you're still with a very long stock portfolio to at least put on some volatility hedges at, if there's some good setups for you. The DAX retesting the recent highs, the recent high area. So if this breaks out higher, again, everything. Oops, wrong one. Harmonics. Here's your key levels. If the DAX can break higher, you're at 24,069 and then 24,632. So I'd look around 24 to 24,070 as your key targets to the upside in the DAX. Again, very overextended, very overbought. So I would not be chasing it higher at this point. I'd be watching for a pullback personally and then a rotation back up to retest. Remember, it's chipping away at this level. Let's just look at the yields. The yields finished the double on Friday. Already come back to 4-hour rotation zone and testing it there. And again, we're rallying up a bit into the press conference. Is there a wonderful setup right now? No, we're back into the massive consolidation range. We've tried to break to the upside. We've tried to break to the downside. And now we're back in the consolidation range. On a continued rally, I'm watching really key area I'm looking at is about 4.38. What else do we have? Who else? Palantir, we'll take a look at that. When VIX or VX is not at extremes, I use VIX and /VX ETFs are not at extremes. Gotcha, Richard. All right, dollar index. So we've really completely established this. I'm watching 99.80. We have an inverse head and shoulders. Now, if this comes back down and breaks below this 98.48 level, it's off the table. You see the rotation zone still holding. But if the dollar reverses and closes above 98.48, I'm watching for a continued dollar bounce play. Crude spiking down and trying to hold this key support. This could be setting up for a little bounce play. I'm going to be watching this tomorrow and paying attention to today's high with the %B bounce. Everybody's getting very bearish in crude again, especially with the OPEC news. But this, it's interesting. If they keep pumping, producers in this country, you got to look at their break-even cost to produce. That's what's key. Otherwise, they won't produce as much. What else? Gold. So we pulled back. Now, I was watching for more of a closer pullback to the bottom of the weekly rotation zone. We did not get it. However, watching Sunday night's price action, we are breaking above Friday's high, which was a potential %B buy, and so far we're following through. So I'm keeping a very close eye on this bounce. This is a bounce play only for me, and my targets right now are 33.60 roughly, and then 33.97. That's going to be on a closing basis. Because if we close above there, then I'll watch for a retest of the recent highs. If we do not, this will just be a secondary bounce that could potentially fail, and we're at cycle lows. So that's why I'm paying attention to this one. Again, I've talked about this before. I can use the futures, I can use ETFs, but it also, when I say long volatility, if there's stuff I'm looking to get into, like if there's stuff that has topping plays on it, I'll actually look to go be long volatility through option plays in individual symbols for topping plays. Because not only could you get a spike in volatility, also, look, if you're looking for stuff pulling back that has really cheap volatility on individual stock symbols, and volatility has gotten crushed and it's gotten very complacent. If there's a long setup, I might still go long with an options, but have it tailored so I'm long Vega. Why? Because even if it starts going against me, if I get a massive pop in volatility, it can offset anything. And then separate from that, yeah, it's ETFs, it's the futures. I really like option spreads and volatility. Okay, I don't like to put on things like condors or butterflies because I do not know where it's going to spike to. Let's see, I lost my train of thought. All right, Euro. We also have the potential head and shoulders topping pattern, but I need a close below about 112.80. 112.80, not triggered yet. Spiders. Key levels I'm watching here, we're going to have a downward close. So to the upside, I'm going to be paying attention to Friday's open at 564.73 on any rally, and then the next thing would be the gap fill 566.76. To the downside, I'm paying attention to Thursday's open 560.37, and then the gap fill at 558.47. Those are the exact things I'm looking at right now. We're looking to open just around Friday's low. The Qs, the same thing. I'm watching first on a rally to the open of 486.54 and then to 488.83. To the downside, I'm watching Thursday's open, 483.41, and then the close 481.68. The major support on the Qs is back at the little breakout area with the rising rotation zone, the hooking up 50, and right around 475.25. By the way, Tesla, this is only valid on the daily. It does have a little daily double top, would need a daily close below 270.78. For Planners Peanuts, Palantir. Again, we got earnings after the close. The key targets to the upside on an earnings beat with a breakout to the upside 132.82 area, then 140.23. The key support areas coming in right around 112. And then the major support areas coming in at 100 to 102. So there's all your targets. Again, is there a toppings thing yet? No. Do we have a massive, massive potential that may never trigger, may never come into play? Yes, you have a massive potential should something ever collapse before this is taken off the table. But the only thing that would wipe that out, again, is if it moves above 140.23. Then that would be off the table. But that's nothing to pay attention to right now because we're a long way off. Hey, Christoph. So for goals, percent beat buy, how much time do you give it to close above the 62.5 for a retest the high versus closing the position? I'll be raising the stop at that level and then trailing. So let's say it got there. What's a good example? What was a good example? Let me think of something else. No, I think it was in copper. Copper was, so for example, see it. Let's just see how it based here. Copper technically closed above it, but this is where I was looking to raise a stop because we got this little mini double top where it was broken. So this on an intraday basis, taken off, watching for the pullback. Okay, so if gold does that kind of thing and makes a topping pattern up around here and bases, I'll be aggressively. It's not like I'm going to, just because I can't close above that, going to unwind the position. But I'll be watching for a topping pattern up there, and then if it triggers, then I'm watching for the pullback again. If gold does not trigger the topping pattern and bases sideways and closes above the 62.5, then it's still a long position. But we're not even at the 50% yet, so I'm not worried about that yet. All right, I think that was about it. Again, not much. I mean, Ford, we got Ford after the close. Oh, by the way, let's look at a couple other things. Ford's against its 200 and events a very strong resistance. So I'm going to, anything can happen with earnings, but I'm going to be watching for potential key pullback here. But again, there's no fantastic setup unless you're more in the gambling sense. But other individual stocks now, because Meta triggered, very overbought. Meta triggered the double bottom on Friday. But this is going to, again, it's already gapping down today. This is one I'd be watching for the pullback, especially with the markets, and then watch for a long setup because it could get way better reward to risk. Okay, so this is one, and this is one I'd be looking at the volatility in Meta because if we can get good volatility, then it can, if I can establish something for the upside and keep longer Vega exposure, then you know what, even if this spikes and drops, we get a spike in volatility, it can help offset any losses if this were to not work out. And I'd be looking at that versus Amazon, which has a potential double bottom. Okay, a potential double bottom. Now, 192.65 is the key. It did not close above that, but the high 192.88. So this is a confirmed but not triggered. It also has a little mini double top in here. So it could potentially be a two-way play. But this is an example where I'd be, if this double top were to trigger in Amazon, this is where I'd be looking to keep extra volatility exposure because we could get a market potential rollover if this one were to trigger, and we could get a little spike in volatility. Okay? But this is not one I'd be, look, this is not triggered to the long side yet. We don't know which one of these, if either are going to trigger. But I'm keeping an eye on both Amazon and a Meta. Meta for a pullback, Amazon to see which one of those triggers. Take a look at Netflix. Netflix is very overextended. Very overextended. So, Netflix, I have not looked at the volatility yet in Netflix. I was going to look at Netflix after the open. It's going to be a gap down today. But I'm going to be watching for, again, look at this. Look at Netflix. Look at this on a monthly basis. Netflix could at some point, I'm not saying this has to happen right in the next few days, but could return to 980 to 1,000. And this is not for the faint at heart because you're going against the trend, so you have to be nimble at this. So I'd be looking at things like put spreads, and if volatility was good, if it was not good, I'd be looking at more even balanced spreads and try to spread off volatility. If volatility is better for Netflix, then I'd be looking at keeping a little extra Vega exposure on a downside pullback. Now, would I be rushing into it on the open? No. I'd be watching to see how this reacts on the open and see how the option prices react. But I'm watching for at least for a potential return to 1,060. Again, this is not something you want to, you're trading against a trend. So you have to be really nimble on stuff like this. I would not recommend this for people starting out because the trend is still up. If you're watching this starting out, I'd be watching for pullback and then rotation up plays. But they're very overbought, cycles pinned to the top, and on a massive tear. Yeah, Netflix implied volatility is only 29, so that could easily spike higher. Good morning, Mark. You're welcome, Anissa. So yeah, that could easily spike up. All right. Or another thing, we might get an initial reaction and a secondary reaction on Netflix putting in a more substantial topping pattern. That's why you also have to be nimble if you're trying to structure this, because you could get a primary reaction to the downside, the second bounce, and those second bounces are where I really like to put on the overextended plays. Okay, because the second bounce, we've already come down to the daily rotation zone on that open. All right, not much to talk about. We'll just see where the tick opened. Again, nothing's changed on the levels I'm watching. Let's just see where the tick has opened. Let's take a look. Now, that's a pretty decent negative opening. So I'm going to be watching on the tick bounce. I'm going to be watching on the next rollover to see if support holds. If it does not, I'll start watching for the bigger pullback in the markets. Yeah, I'd be watching for it to come back in. You know, watch as soon as this settles down. As soon as it settles down again, you got to be patient on these plays. You got to be patient. The trend is still up. Negative opening today. We got Fed week. But this is where, well, I mean, even the VIX. The VIX, I mean, it's a little slight bounce up, but did I miss anything? Oh, I should have run in and bought it on Friday. No. We got time. So, at least I believe we have time. All right, with that, I hope everyone has a wonderful, wonderful trading day. I will talk to everyone tomorrow. Bye for now. Remember, 10 a.m., by the way, 10 a.m. Eastern. Keep an eye out for the ISM numbers because you can definitely get a market reaction from that. Bye for now.